Hello, myself Sunil Ramkrishna. Here basically we are discussing about the topic that is text box. So here basically one of the person basically told that from USA basically USA government that how you can say basically that we don't know this text box equal to just to basically confirm basically really basically is just he's just telling like that only or basically because they also don't know. USA government mostly basically if you want to verify you can check that American government don't know text box equal to 1,000 cities. Means text box is getting derived from 1,000 cities. Means in more simple language when that 1,000 city power supply basically comes to computer. For example, Vadodara city basically there are around assume that basically 45 lakh people basically are there. From 45 lakh basically at least 7 lakh people basically might be using the internet. So they might be using the text box. So assume that basically around 35 crore basically text box get display in computer screen. So Vadodara city assume that basically 1,000 city basically is giving the power supply. That's why basically the power supply basically on the base of that power supply the text box is getting displayed in Vadodara city. Assume that basically only 500 city basically connected to Vadodara city and they have given the power supply. Rest of country basically was not rest of city basically was not able to give the power supply due to checking basically they basically tested the thing. So let's set of stuff basically is 100% going to happen basically. So that is basically we have already discussed. So that is not the point. So here the thing is how basically they confirmed this basically. That Sunil basically is telling 100% correct or not. How basically they don't know. Government basically don't know this. Why government don't know? That is also there are also basically the reasons basically. So here basically the stuff is Microsoft 100% don't know. If Microsoft don't know, that means their customers also basically don't know this. Their customers are Accenture, Capgemini, Patani, Oracle, then Rishabh Software Company, then NetWeb Solution, then in Vadodara, these all are the companies of Vadodara city. Then Numerator company is there. Like these very big companies basically are there in Vadodara city. So they also 100% don't know this thing. Why? Because Microsoft only don't know. Then how their basically clients are going to get the information. So one person basically asked the question, how you are 100% confident that basically government don't know, USA government. Indian government don't know 100%. Because Indian government is not connected with the software basically. They are basically telling that they are basically taking supply from software service basically from American market basically. Because here the stuff basically the person who created India basically, who created Mumbai is basically the heart of Hindustan. So the person who created the heart of India basically, he designed very perfectly basically. He given the entire software service to USA because he know that basically. One day it might possible that because he don't know few things basically. So he basically has not taken the risk. So in future basically space center, satellite group basically is going to do something basically that will be to American government. And American government's American land basically. And there basically the American people basically who elected the the president basically, their basically prime minister does not exist. So that public basically might get in suffer basically. So here basically I am not telling that basically they are 100% going to suffer. If the problem basically gets solved, then basically they are not going to suffer. But if by chance basically Space Center Group basically has used this text box and each and every that 1,000 city power supply data basically, and that is sent by the space center basically, that is the satellites basically, which are basically getting fired daily basically to the space center, and on the base of that power supply basically they are getting the text box basically. So assume that just taking example basically, but that is 100% sure basically this is not tested, and before testing basically lots of things basically has to be taken into the picture basically. So here one person basically asked the question, what is the source of Microsoft? How basically the Microsoft know that basically this is new basically? That is also one of the thing basically. That is also one of the. So he told that basically, अरे भाई हम book पढ़ते basically. We read the books. We read the magazines. We read the internets basically. From internet basically we get lots of information basically. So here basically what are the stuff? That are the sources, and that sources only basically are into the environment, and on the base of that environment basically the people gets the idea. One person told that यार मेरे को shoe लेना है. So he basically his mind basically started thinking, अरे I want to take shoe, I want to take shoe. So the city creator basically has set the environment basically that whenever basically he is going to think for the human needs basically, what are the first priority going to connect to his brain. So nowadays basically it's a digital world. So digital environment is set across the human bodies. So they basically say that we will search basically Google this that basically Lycos is there, this that, then Rediff website basically are there. We will be going to search there, and from that basically we are going to get the number basically. So first priority came into the brain is what? Digital world. Few person basically say that we basically have some bad ideas, bad experience, so we will ask someone else. So these all are the sources which are settled in the environment. So one person told that same way the American government also basically have the source. Their sources are Microsoft, SAP, PHP, Java. Old group basically are C, C++, Pascal, mainframe. These all are the old sources of old presidents of American basically. So that time also basically they were deriving the text box as a subscription only. So Microsoft basically don't have anything basically in his pocket. Why? Microsoft Corporation website basically, if anybody want to develop, then what the stuff basically have to do? He basically have to derive the text box, combo box, this, that basically. He basically needs some programming basically. In programming basically, if condition, this condition, while loop, for loop. That is also connected with the cities basically. If that city, for example, assume that basically in one programming language, one ERP basically, one module basically is getting developed. In that basically around 1 crore for loop, not 1 crore basically, 1 lakh for loop basically has written. It's a big ERP basically. So just taking as an example, 1 lakh basically is a just rough example. In really basically it might be 1,000, 500. So I am taking 1 lakh maximum basically. So he told that basically this is the maximum number for loop basically. This is also basically connected with the cities basically. Cities basically telling that basically you can only have basically 1 lakh for loop. Beyond that basically you have to check that also basically. So here basically I am taking one number 1 lakh. So 1 lakh for loop basically you can use in the ERP basically. So assume that basically that 1 lakh for loop, the for loop basically is connected with 500 cities. So the 500 cities basically are giving the power supply to that for loop basically. So we are basically getting into the Microsoft Microsoft Corporation company. Inside Microsoft Corporation basically they have created one product, .NET basically. In that .NET basically we are going to the C# or basically any language basically you can take it. So they told that basically we have created one ERP package, sorry, ERP product basically. In that ERP product basically we have taken 1 lakh for loop. So one for loop basically is created from the thousands, sorry, 500 cities. So whenever basically for loop is going to be executed from the program through the websites that are basically the clients and server basically connects. So they basically whenever basically they executes the for loop, whenever basically the assume that basically login page basically is there, that basically executes for loop. Just taking as an example basically. So he told that basically, or basically the submission page. In submission page, lots of basically the conditions basically are getting checked. That is the business logic basically, whatever things basically you can say. That business logic basically is written in the .NET basically. That is the C#. So he told that for loop basically will 100% basically will not execute if that 500 city is not giving the power supply to the computer. So here one person basically asked the question basically, which computer basically? That is also a question basically. That is also a question. For example, assume that basically Vadodara city basically is not getting the. So one person told that here basically lots of techniques basically are getting used. That this particular city is not getting for loop condition, that city basically is getting for loop condition. That city is basically getting while loop condition, that city is not getting while loop condition power. So here one person told that is basically very high level programming group basically that connects to the military level programming, army level programming. So that basically we are not going into that basically. Otherwise basically lots of people says that kya bol raha hai bhai? We are not able to understand. So that is basically that also basically we will take little bit basically. So here one person told that 500 city basically is giving the power supply. That time basically for loop worked. But suddenly basically one person told that yeah, there are basically some certain issue basically in few nuclear power company basically and some power companies. They due to that basically they basically were not able to give the power supply from that 500 city. So here for loop is not going to execute. So one person told that have you checked this? Then Microsoft told that basically we actually first time basically hearing this thing. What you have told basically. Then they basically started the. So one of the person told us, Sunil, basically this your video na basically is one of the source for American government. Because lots of things basically American government don't know basically. And the American public basically has elected American government. So that basically we are not going into that basically. Because American government will say that basically हम तो भाई अभी अभी आए, we have basically just came just now. That is the word basically. All politics people basically see. If we ask BJP basically, BJP will say that basically, so basically we are, हम तो basically just we basically came just now. ये if for loop basically we are not aware basically. But when we watched your video basically, that time basically we got that basically यार ये तो basically. So they basically started collecting that 500 cities basically because this was something dangerous basically, something different thing basically. So one person basically, one Java developer basically told that, yeah, Sunil, this is basically very dangerous thing you basically told this. So one person basically asked the question, if for loop basically is created from 500 cities, so there might be someone basically who might have created one software specially for this for loop. That is 100% sure, na, basically. Because for loop is very dangerous thing basically. We think that basically it's very normal thing basically, but when you go in deeper basically, it's very dangerous thing basically. For loop basically, loops. That's only basically thing we know basically. Even basically we are the director of the software company, like basically Accenture software company basically have 15 directors. Capgemini basically company have 15 directors, senior directors, whatever basically vice president. They also basically told that basically yes, this is something new basically. हमको ही पता नहीं था basically. Because Software industry basically have the set of source. In that source basically you will not able to get there. But now basically you have the source of this video. So here basically I am not advertising myself basically. Here basically we are going to the real picture basically. So he told that 500 city basically is giving the power supply. That's why for loop is getting executed. So that's why basically for loop. Now while loop, same way if conditions. So Microsoft told that basically, yeah, then what we have basically? That is also a question basically. After watching this video basically he might be thinking. Microsoft basically 100% might be thinking. Even basically if Microsoft is thinking, then government will not think that is the American government. Because they trusted Microsoft. And Microsoft basically trusted government. But government basically don't know that basically Microsoft is basically only aware about this stuff basically. So you can just imagine basically up to what level the stuff basically are. So Microsoft told that we don't know this. Bill Gates told that basically, Sunil, मेरे को तो नहीं पता. Basically, he don't know Hindi. He told that basically, I don't know basically. I am basically just telling example. Basically, I don't know Bill Gates. Otherwise, lots of people says that, yeah, तेरे को Bill Gates पहचानता है. So I am not talking that basically. I am just telling as an example basically. Because Microsoft don't have any source. While loop basically, you can basically tell the list of the list of cities basically. On the base of that city power supply basically, the for loop is getting work. So for loop is working on the base of that 500 cities. So the one of the person told that one of the very dangerous developer basically, assume that basically is the number one developer of Java, .NET, whatever basically. He told that basically ये तो मेरे को पता नहीं था यार basically. You basically just now told that basically. So he started counting basically. So one of the person told that can we debug this basically? Then how you will debug basically? Because novel basically is one boundary basically. You can't go beyond the novel. That is the boot basically. When you boot the software basically, that time novel DOS basically where software is somebody has created. So he basically can understand this basically what actually I want to say. But he also basically might be knowing this if condition because in DOS also basically if conditions are there. DOS also if conditions basically are there. But while loop basically might be having while also loop might be having, but DOS programming also there na basically. In there also basically if conditions are there. So if he might have tracked this long before, then this problem basically might not have occurred. So that is Noval Group basically. The Noval is basically one company basically that is mostly basically is in Bangalore or basically Mumbai. Same way basically Java basically is one company basically. They basically have some supporting of the Java software basically in some Vashi area, that is the Navi Mumbai basically. So they also might be thinking basically a little bit that sahi mein aisa hai kya basically. So they told that basically can we debug this? That is not possible na basically. Because novel boundary is basically there. And in that boundary basically you can't debug it. Because you can't debug the power supply na basically. From where basically the power supply is coming, you can't debug it basically. There is no tool in this world basically. Even basically satellite group also might not be having. Why? Because space center basically are sending the satellites data to the space center, so that basically in the space center basically which is in sky basically they have their power supply data which is sent by the earth planet, which is sent by the NASA and ISRO group of the set of scientists collected the data that this is the power supply. So they also basically might not be having this debugging tool. So one of the person told that this video basically whoever basically might be watching, and this is basically the source for American government also basically. One of the source basically this channel basically, you can say that this is one of the source basically you can find something new basically. So here basically I am not advertising myself basically, that lots of people will say that भाई ये तो अपनी marketing कर रहा लगता है, but this is not marketing basically, this is basically the knowledge basically which you will never get in the any of the book basically. So one person told that Microsoft basically didn't. One person to the editor basically he have ना basically editor तो है उसके पास where basically is writing, but that is also one of the source. He is also basically might be subscribing, he might be using something basically a tool, something base basically he might be using. So one person told that this basically is supposed to be debugged na basically, because when basically Microsoft is telling that basically this Apple is created from Microsoft software, Microsoft energy, Microsoft blood cells, then basically why this was not debugged. So one of the person told that Microsoft doctor log to hai na basically, because Microsoft say that basically Sunil basically you told right thing basically, we have our doctors basically, doctors will tell us basically. That is also correct. He will basically directly tell to the doctors, but doctor you have not tracked this basically, because you have the medicines and you have the disease basically. When you check the blood cells basically, that time basically the data basically are told, data basically says that basically from this city basically the disease basically came, and that is the city basically which is created for the medicine purpose basically for this particular city. Because blood basically whenever you check the blood, that time basically tells basically this is the disease which came from this city, this is the blood basically, sorry, this is the city basically which from where basically you can find the medicine basically. So city energy equal to medicine, sorry, city energy equal to chemical, chemical equal to software's chemicals data, and then basically the medicines are prepared basically. So one of the person told that yes basically. So one of the person that time basically they might have tracked this basically, they were supposed to track this basically, but they can track the if conditions, else conditions, while loops, because Microsoft told that basically we have created Apple, we have not dumped into in Apple that basically if condition, while loop condition, we have not dumped it. So blood checking group told that basically why if condition, how basically we are going to check the if condition in Apple basically. That question basically also will raise. So if condition equal to 500 city, while loop equal to 500 city, for loop is created from 500 cities, that how basically we are going to track this basically. So one person told that बैंक basically नहीं था, बैंक के पास नहीं है, बैंक don't know basically the 500 cities created, they know that basically 500 cities created, but it is connecting to which power supply company, which nuclear power company, who is giving the power to the computer basically, who is giving the power to the source, that bank basically might be having, they might not be having. Why? Because banks basically who are basically the investor basically of the nuclear power company, the banks are totally different basically. They might not be listing basically in the front of the public also. So you can't go up to that level also. So to debug also basically it's very difficult. To debug also basically it's not easy. So in next video basically we are going to see a little bit more about this topic.